like this part right here. Come on.
Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of a new day begun. Let us march on
Let us march on.
till victory is won.
Now we add a little something to it. Just to encourage you. We're going to take you to church later. Let's go.
We'll keep marching, fighting till the victory is won.
To all my brothers out there.
Hold your head up, brother, till the victory is won.
To all my sisters in the struggle.
Keep believing, sister, till the victory is won.
Till that day. Hey.
Let us march on
To victory.
till victory.
Black History program is titled Education, Passing the Baton. Our program will explore how our ancestors focused on education in Africa long before we set foot in America. Our program will share with you some of the key people and events in our Black history that you may not find in many textbooks today. Like we have in Pastor Emeritus Reverend Dr. Lester L. Cannon, and also in Pastor Reverend Dr. Maurice Bates, and the many historical church leaders who, while leading us in our biblical and spiritual education and growth, were also the champions for the battle for equality, education for our youth. As the program will show you, we are descendants of outstanding scholars, mathematicians, scientists, and educators. As the program will show you, we are descendants of outstanding scholars, mathematicians, scientists, and educators who have fought long and hard for equality of education in our communities. The struggle is long from over. Please sit back and enjoy our program, Education, Passing the Baton.
Good morning, everyone. We are happy that you are able to join us today for our 2022 Black History Celebration, Education, Passing the Baton. Today's focus is on passing the educational baton to the next generation of our people. In Proverbs 1:1-9, King Solomon wrote the following words: to teach his people how to live and act in every circumstance. He wanted them to be understanding, just, and fair in everything they did. I want to make simple-minded wise, he said. I want to warn young men about some problems they will face. I want those already wise to become wiser and become leaders by exploring the depths of meaning in these nuggets of truth. How does a man become wise? The first step is to trust and reverence in the Lord. Only fools refuse to be taught. Listen to your father and mother. What you learn from them will stand you in good stead. It will gain you many honors. We can see these same principles adopted in the educating of the Black race. This education process started before Black people were taken from their homes in Africa. It is not widely known Africa was the seat of education. Our African descendants were educated in universities located throughout Africa. Yes, we had universities in Africa, which dispels the myth that we were an ignorant people, which America used to justify their treatment of us as a race. Delia and Zion, can you enlighten us on the history of the universities in Africa?
We are currently in the 12th century, long before the European Renaissance in the 14th century. The University of Timbuktu was the world's first university, producing outstanding scholars. It was located in the thriving city and had the most universities than any other nation. At its peak, the university at Timbuktu had 25,000 students in the city of 100,000 people. This is because of Timbuktu's geographical location. Many trade routes intersected here, and it was accessible by both desert and sea. Timbuktu was known as the crossroads, where the camel met the canoe, and was a very rich nation. The university's curriculum consisted of various degrees of learning called primary, secondary, and superior, as well as what they call the circle of knowledge. Other studies included literature, science, mathematics, and medicine.
Looking into the 20th century, Makerere University in Uganda is the oldest and the most prestigious university in Africa, from 1916 to 1959. During this time period, Blacks in America were fighting for equal education, which resulted in the Supreme Court decision of Brown versus the Board of Education in 1954. Fort Hart in Africa is the oldest university responsible for the high standard of education come across sub-Saharan Africa. Today, there are more than 700,000 manuscripts still being displayed in public libraries and private collections, and are now being listed and digitized. These books include religion, law, literature, science, manuscript on subjects such as mathematics, astrology, optics, chemistry, medicine, and others.
Talk about learning nuggets of truth. That was very enlightening. As you can see, when our people were brought to America on slave ships, they were not an unlearned people, but a people of intelligence. We were sold into slavery, forced to deny our culture and language, and were denied any opportunities for further learning. The possibility that we could even be educated was not considered. The United States is the only country known to have prohibited the education of enslaved African Americans. The education of slaves was eventually made illegal in most of the southern states, except for religious instruction. After the revolt of Nat Turner in 1831, the prohibition of education was extended to some states to include free blacks. Slave owners saw literacy as a threat to the institution of slavery and their financial profits. They were correct in their assumption that the educated slave would be dissatisfied with their living conditions and subsequently rebel against their owners. But despite the handicaps presented by the language barrier and the strange land and customs, they were forced to adapt. Our ancestors set out to educate themselves. They did not drop the baton. We will look at some of the ways this occurred and the obstacles slaves had to overcome in order to be educated. Two great educators that came out of this period of slavery were George Washington Carver and Frederick Douglass.
Despite the literacy laws that were passed, not everyone agreed with them. Both black free men and slaves learned to read as the result of the efforts of free African Americans, sympathetic whites, and headed informal schools that were set up in order to maintain their culture. The slaves would use storytelling, music, and crafts to pass along their heritage. In the northern states, they were able to attend formal schools to learn basic reading and writing. These schools were set up by the Quakers in the years before the Revolutionary War.
Religion played a big part in the slaves learning to read. Reading was encouraged in religious instruction, but writing was not. Certain religious groups felt they had a spiritual obligation to convert their slaves to Christianity. To be able to read the scriptures was a part of the conversion. Writing was considered to be a mark of status and unnecessary for the slave. It was seen as something only white men could do. In 1834, Phyllis Wheatley proved them wrong when she was taught to write in the home of her master. She used her writing skills to write poetry and address leaders of government on her views about slavery. This is one of her poems, on being brought from Africa to America. "'Twas mercy brought me from pagan land, taught my benighted soul to understand that there's a God, that there's a Savior too. Once our redemption neither sought nor knew. Some view our sable race with scornful eye. The color is a diabolic dye. Remember, Christians, Negroes, black as Cain, may be refined and join the angelic train."
The Nat Turner Revolt in the Southampton County, Virginia in 1831 caused the South to enact laws prohibiting the education of slaves over the next 3 decades. The fear of slave insurrections and the spread of abolitionist material by people against slavery would cause the slave to question the authority of their owner. This led to reading by slaves being prohibited. Laws were passed to prevent more than 12 slaves to meet at night. Black preachers had to petition a judge or justice of the peace before speaking to a crowd. Mississippi, which already had illiteracy laws, passed a law in 1841 that required all free slaves to leave the state so they would not. Mississippi, which already had illiteracy laws, passed a law in 1841 that required all free slaves to leave the state so they would not educate more slaves. Alabama passed a law stating that anyone who attempted to educate slaves will be fined between $250 and $550. This law also stated that 5 slave owners had to be present when black freemen or slaves assembled.
In 1780, the Pennsylvania Society for Promoting Abolition of Slavery took on the task to help former slaves with economics and education. They also helped with legal obligations to make sure slaves did not get sold back into slavery. The New York Manumission Society established the school for free blacks called the African Free School in 1787.
What did I see? Coming for to carry me home. A band of angels coming.
George Washington Carver was born in the early mid-1860s into slavery and died January 5th, 1943. George Washington Carver was born in the early mid-1860s into slavery and died January 5th, 1943. He was a scientist of soil, inventor, teacher, and environmentalist way before his time. He is best known for his many products made from peanuts as displayed here. George Washington Carver had a lot to say about the process of education. Here are a few of his quotes, starting with, "Education is the key to unlock the golden door of freedom."
Since new developments are the products of a creative mind, we must therefore stimulate and encourage that type of mind in every way possible.
Most people searched high and wide for the key to success, only if they knew the key to their dreams lies within.
Education, in the broadest of true sense, will make an individual see to help all people, regardless of race, regardless of condition.
I know nothing more inspiring than of making discoveries for oneself.
Where there is no vision, there is no hope.
I love the smell of the soap. Did you know you could dye your hair with peanut butter? Check it out on YouTube. Castor oil made from peanuts, and it still tastes bad. My hands will smell and feel better with this lotion made from peanuts.
Frederick Douglass was born an orphan and a slave in 1818 and was forbidden to read or attend school. He was obsessed with obtaining both an education and his freedom. After his master prevented his mistress from teaching him, Douglass learned to read and write by observing white students and literate adults, taking note of how they wrote and used words. After multiple failed attempts to escape his bondage, he finally escapes by using his knowledge of deceit. With his freedom, Douglass became an activist, protesting against segregation. He constantly pushed for black education and equality for black people. Frederick Douglass wrote several speeches and letters about education. Here are some of the powerful things he said.
I know the value of education by having it. I know the value by not having it. By Frederick Douglass.
Education means emancipation. It means light and liberty. It means the uplifting of the soul of man into the glorious light of truth, the light by which men can only be made free.
Once you learn to read, you will be forever free. It is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. Knowledge makes a man unfit to be a slave.
To enslave men successfully and safely, it is necessary to have their minds occupied with thoughts and aspirations short of the liberty of which they are deprived. A certain degree of attainable good must be kept before them.
I, Alexander Dumas, am a French author. I received a letter from a Southern Democrat inviting me to their country. He wanted me to present my books, The Count of Monte Cristo and The Three Musketeers. I replied with this letter. Paris, 1847. Sir, my mother was a Negro, and I am not ashamed to confess that my person makes open declaration of my lineage. I am anxious to visit your country. One thing deters me. I am told that my African blood will subject me to inconveniences in your country, and that I may even be taken and sold as a slave, according to existing laws in your country.
The next laws we see that affected the education of black people occurred in the U.S. Supreme Court in what is known as the Plessy versus Ferguson decision. This decision came about because Homer Plessy challenged the legality of separate but equal railroad cars in 1896. Justice John Marshall Harlan, speaking on behalf of Plessy, stated that there is no superior, dominant, ruling class of citizens. There is no caste here. Our Constitution is colorblind. The other judges did not agree, and separate but equal became a law. This led to Jim Crow legislation on the state level and separate public accommodations based on race in public transportation, stores, post offices, drinking fountains, bathrooms, libraries, and schools. At the same time, we see a rise in the membership of the Ku Klux Klan to make sure these state laws were enforced in the South. Black colleges were founded to provide opportunities for black children to be educated. Among them were Atlanta University, Virginia Union, Spelman, Hampton Institute, and Clark.
What is a historically black college? HBCU. Historically black colleges and universities were created or founded with the intention of serving the Black American community. According to the Higher Education Act of 1965, these institutions were nationally accredited and were formed before 1964 for the purpose of providing quality education to Black Americans. The earliest historically black colleges and universities were formed pre-Civil War, the first being Cheyney University in Pennsylvania. Started in 1837, the Cheyney University was established to educate people of African descent and prepare them primarily to become teachers. After Cheyney, other schools slowly began popping up, many of which were formed and funded by religious groups seeking to help elevate the general education and the well-being of Black Americans.
Spelman College is a private institution that was founded in 1881 as the Atlanta Baptist Female Seminary. The history of Spelman is traced back to when two Boston women began teaching a small group of Black women, mostly ex-slaves, in an Atlanta church basement. 2 years later, the school moved to the site of Fort McPherson. In 1901, it began awarding degrees, and in 1924, it became what we know now as Spelman College. Spelman was the first historically Black female institution of higher education to receive its collegiate charter. Spelman is the oldest historically Black college for women in America. Stacey Yvonne Abrams is a notable Spelman graduate. Ms. Abrams is an American politician, lawyer, voting rights activist, and author who served in the Georgia House of Representatives from 2007 to 2017.
Howard University, the real HU, was founded in 1866 by missionaries as a training facility for Black preachers. In 1867, Howard held classes with 5 white female students, the founders' daughters. Built on 3 acres, Howard sought to the education of 150,000 freed slaves. By 1872, it was decided the school would be named after Civil War hero General Oliver O. Howard, a white man who was serving as the commissioner of the Freedmen's Bureau. General Howard had also served as president of Howard University from 1869 to 1872. Within a year, the school's focus had expanded to include liberal arts and medical training. It was not until 1926 that Howard received its first Black president, Dr. Mordecai Wyatt Johnson. Vice President Kamala Harris is a notable Howard University graduate, as well as a native of Oakland, California.
Hampton University is a private, historically Black research university in Hampton, Virginia. Founded in 1868, it was established by Black and white leaders by the Missionary Association of the American Missionary Association after the American Civil War to provide education to the freedmen. The campus was founded on the grounds of Little Scotland, a former plantation in Elizabeth City County. In 1861, the AMA responded to former slaves needed for the education. In 1861, the AMA responded to former slaves' needs for education and hired Mary Smith Peake as its first teacher. She had already been secretly teaching slaves, despite the state's legal prohibition.
Morehouse College is a private institution that was founded in 1867 as the Augusta Institute by an Atlanta Baptist minister and cabinet maker. With the support of the Reverend Richard C. Coulter, a former slave from Atlanta, Georgia, and the Reverend Edmund Turney, organizer of the National Theological Institute for Educating Freedom in Washington, D.C., the institution was founded to educate Black American men in theology and education. The institution moved from Augusta, Georgia to Atlanta, Georgia in 1879 and changed the name to Atlanta Baptist Seminary. The name of the institute changed again in 1897 to Atlanta Baptist College. And then in 1913, the name was changed to what we now know as Morehouse College. Morehouse is the largest men's liberal arts college in the United States. Morehouse is also one of the original members of Atlanta University Center Consortium, which is one of the oldest and largest contiguous consortiums of African American and higher education institutions in the United States. Notable alumni include Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Baptist minister, Spike Lee, filmmaker, Samuel L. Jackson, actor, and many, many more.
Let's take a moment, everyone, to just acknowledge some historically black colleges and universities that were founded by black Americans. Wilberforce University was founded in 1856 by the Cincinnati Conference of the Methodist Episcopal Church in Cincinnati, Ohio, to provide classical education and teacher training for black youth. This is the first black-owned and operated HBCU. Bethune-Cookman University. Mary McLeod Bethune founded the Daytona Educational and Industrial Training School for Negro girls in 1904. The school underwent several stages of growth and development through the years. In 1923, it merged with the Cookman Institute of Jacksonville, Florida. Bethune-Cookman is a private, historically black university, which is affiliated with the United Methodist Church. Again, we see our ancestors passing the baton when it came to the education of our people. They did not step back. They moved forward. And because of their sacrifice, young black youth in America had the right to our own education.
Where there is no vision, there is no hope. George Washington Carver.
The price of liberty is less than the price of repression. W.E.B. Du Bois. Power is never given, it is won. A. Philip Randolph.
Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere by Martin Luther King Jr.
Education is our passport to the future, for tomorrow belongs to the people who prepare for it today. Malcolm X.
The walls, the bars, the guns, and the guards can never encircle or hold down the idea of the people. Huey P. Newton.
There are two people in the world who are not likable, a slave and a master. Nikki Giovanni.
Change will not come if we wait for some other person or some other time. We are the ones we've been looking for. We are the change that we seek. President Barack Obama.
Power to the people!
While black colleges were being found, Booker T. Washington founded Tuskegee Institute in Alabama in 1881. He believed that the most practical training for blacks was vocational. William Edward Burghardt Du Bois, the first black person to graduate from Harvard, did not agree with Washington. Yes, we have blacks who graduated from white colleges, including George Washington Carver, who taught a new way of farming at Tuskegee Institute. Carver agreed with Washington's ideas, and later on, other black educators came to embrace Washington's ideas regarding the value of vocational training.
W.E.B. Du Bois. Du Bois' opinions on Washington's ideas were that he felt Washington was urging blacks to embrace Jim Crow until whites gradually got used to our race as we acquired skills. One of Washington's statements was, "We can be as separate as fingers, yet one as the hand." Du Bois felt that blacks should have access to higher education. His theory was that the talented 10 who had educational advantages should teach others. If he felt Washington was giving in to white racist ideology by restricting blacks to occupational trades. Du Bois felt focusing occupational trades sent the message to whites that blacks were inferior to them. Du Bois refused to accommodate with white racism, where Washington accommodated it.
When Franklin Delano Roosevelt became president, he ushered in what was known as the New Deal program. Within this New Deal, certain programs emerged that affected black students. One such program was the National Youth Administration, a division of Negro Affairs. Mary McLeod Bethune, educator and founder of Bethune-Cookman College, was appointed to head the program. In the student work program, the Civilian Conservation Corps employed 200,000 young blacks. The Work Projects Administration employed approximately 1 million black people in jobs ranging from secretaries to artists. Embracing the arts, the Federal Writers Projects, which resulted in the emergence of novelists, folklorists, and story writers, producing works from the black perspective.
To ensure the education of our black children and that the baton will continue to be passed, education became a civil rights issue. This led to laws being passed by the Supreme Court, protests, and demonstrations. Two key events came into play in order to make sure that the baton would not drop. The United Negro College Fund was established in 1944 to support black colleges and universities, and the NAACP waged an attack on the segregation of public schools, stating that black segregated schools were not equal to white segregated schools. This resulted in the Brown versus Board of Education decision of 1954.
Brown versus the Board of Education. This decision made separate but equal in public schools unconstitutional on May 17, 1954. Racial segregation in public schools were outlawed. The law was on the books, but the law was not being enforced, as the schools in the South remained segregated. On May 31, 1955, a second Brown versus Board of Education decision was made. Educational integration was to be achieved with all deliberated speed, because President Eisenhower was not supportive of civil rights issues. Negro leaders met with him to request that he openly pledged to support the Brown decision.
Little Rock 9. In 1957, the Supreme Court was challenged in regards to the integration of schools. 9 black students tried to register at Little Rock Central High in Arkansas. Governor Orville Farvis barred their admittance by posting state National Guards in front of the school. It took a Supreme Court edict, a presidential proclamation, the 101st Army Airborne Division, and a special federalized state militia to escort the students to school. With the strength of many supporters like Daisy Bates, the president of the Arkansas NAACP, the struggle for equality in education ended in victory.
James Meredith. Meredith was a
civil rights figure, writer, political advisor, and Air Force veteran. He was the first African American student admitted to racially segregated University of Mississippi. In 1962, a graduate of Jackson State College repeatedly applied to the University of Mississippi for admission. State officials initially refused to enforce U.S. Supreme Court order to integrate the oldest University of Mississippi. James Meredith, with the help of the NAACP, went on appeal his legal battle with the University of Mississippi. It was found that the university had denied him on the basis of his race and mental. Following large campus riots, which left 2 people dead, James Meredith was admitted to the university under the protection of the federal marshal.
Feel it in this room. Holy Spirit move. 'Cause when you have your way, something has to break. Tear down every lie. Set the wrong thing right. 'Cause when you have your way, something has to break. Something has to break. Right now in your name, something has to break. Something has to break. Right now in your name, something has to break. I believe you lead me to it. I believe you get me through it. I believe that you will do it right now. Something
Even in today's society, the education of our black children continues to be a struggle. In order to level the playing field for black students to enter such colleges like the Universities of California or Harvard, the Affirmative Action Policy, or the Positive Discrimination Policy, was introduced. Our students were at a disadvantage due to the developmental and poverty traps towards receiving a higher education. By providing grants and scholarships under the Affirmative Action programs, it allowed our students to attend these colleges, leveling the field of a higher education. But then we see white America challenging the affirmative action policy, stating that it led to reverse discrimination against them. The education discrimination continues today in how schools are being funded in higher economic versus lower or poverty-stricken communities. So as a people, we must continue to fight as our ancestors did to make sure our children receive the quality education that they deserve. Here are a few of our people who continue the fight for education today.
John Lewis was a politician and a civil rights activist who served in the United States House of Representatives for Georgia's 5th Congressional District from 1987 until his death on July 17, 2020. After meeting with movement leaders in Montgomery, Alabama, Lewis decided not to pursue admittance into Troy State College in Alabama because his parents were fearful that he would be killed. He was educated at Fisk University and American Baptist College in Nashville, Tennessee. He was most famous for getting into good trouble as a freedom rider, a founding member of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, an organizer from the March on Washington, as a leader of the famed march in Selma, Alabama, that became known as Bloody Sunday. Some of his famous quotes are,
"When you see something that is not right, not fair, not just, you must speak up. You must be bold, you must be brave, you must be courageous, and find a way to get in the way. Voting is the most powerful and nonviolent tool we have. Be hopeful, never give up."
Michelle LaVaughn Robinson Obama is an American attorney and author
who served as the First Lady of the United States from 2008 to 2016. She was the first African American to serve in this position. She is the wife of the former President Barack Obama. Mrs. Obama attended Whitney Young Magnet High School in Chicago, Illinois. She also attended Princeton University in Princeton, New Jersey, and Harvard Law School in Cambridge, Massachusetts. As First Lady, Mrs. Obama visited sophomores at Bell Multicultural High School in Washington, D.C. On November 12, 2013, she addressed the class with these words. One of the very first things Barack did when he came into office was to set what he calls a North Star goal for America, that by the year 2020, our country will have the highest proportion of college graduates in the world. In her remarks, Mrs. Obama spoke directly to young people about committing to their education so that they could create a better future for themselves, their communities, and their countries. She shared some of her personal academic experiences to illustrate her beliefs that circumstances do not define your future, but rather your attitude. And we see this coming truth this month. Michelle Childs, a Black female judge from South Carolina and an advocate for education, was elected by President Biden to the Supreme Court. On February 1st, 2022, she officially replaces the retiring Justice Stephen Breyer.
Reverend Dr. Leston L. Cannon Sr., a native of Mabin, Alabama. Reverend Cannon is the pastor emeritus of the Cornerstone Missionary Baptist Church in Oakland, California, where he served as senior pastor for the past 42 years. His first pastorate was at the Morning Star Baptist Church from 1974 through 1979. Reverend Cannon attended Prescott High School in Alabama and was awarded 2 honorary doctorate degrees in theology for his work in the ministry, one from Salt Lake Baptist College in 2000 and the other from St. Thomas Christian College in 2003. He received his Master of Theological Studies in October 2005 and his Doctor of Divinity degree on October 12, 2007, both from Faith Seminary in Tacoma, Washington. Under his leadership, Reverend Cannon made evangelism, discipleship, Christian education, missions, youth, ministry, and stewardship priorities. Reverend Cannon was active in community affairs, having served as chairman of the board of the Nationwide Evangelism Training, also known as NET, for 25 years, was the executive board chairman of the First Northern Christian Network, former chairman of the Evangelical Committee for the Baptist Ministers Union of Oakland, a trustee for the Golden State Convention, East Bay Baptist Association, and the Southern Baptist Convention, just to name a few. In 2009, Reverend Cannon realized his dream in opening the Cornerstone Christian Academy, CCA, soon to be LL Cannon Christian Academy. He authored a book titled Helpful Hints on Practical Prayer. It has 33 sons of the ministry who have acknowledged their calling to preach the gospel, with several of them currently pastoring or having done so in the past. For the past 20 years, Cornerstone has awarded numerous scholarships to graduating students to assist them with their educational pursuits, and I am one of them. His teaching and preaching abilities have made him well loved and highly respected. Most of all, Reverend Cannon is a man of God whose main concern is the spiritual growth and holistic ministry of those he has been given the task of serving as under-shepherd for the past 42 years.
This brings our Black History program on education, passing the baton to an end. We hope you enjoyed the program. In closing, I would like to say to you and the younger generation, in the words of King Solomon, found in Proverbs 9:9, I want those already wise to become wiser and become leaders by exploring the depths of meaning in these nuggets of truth. Thank you for watching. God bless.
Something new is coming to me. How do I know? 'Cause we got history. Yeah, let's go. Each day I still say thank you. Oh yeah. Some days I still face trials, and I say I wish, yeah. I wish.
I hope you enjoyed the program. Thank you, Cornerstone and Mount Zion Youth and Young Adults, for your participation Thank you, CCA, Cornerstone Christian Academy, teachers and students for your participation as well. The program showed me that education is for improving the lives of others and leaving this world better than you found it. We are our ancestors' dreams. We are Black history. Now we have the baton, and our task with being champions for education for our youth. On behalf of all of those involved in this program, we would like to give a special thanks again to Pastor Reverend Dr. Maurice Bates for allowing us to put the program on again this year. I also want to recognize Sister Joanne Bimbo, who wrote the script, and for all the work she does for the youth and young adults here at Cornerstone. She works tirelessly to make sure that we keep education and Christian education in front of our youth. Again, I want to say thank you to Pastor Bates, thank you to Pastor Cannon, and we just want to say God bless you all. May you have continued blessings, and God bless you.